not worthy to stand, in whose presence we must wave incense, has somehow held off an economic collapse. Amazing. What an extraordinary man this is. Well, here's what the extraordinary man actually did. In 2001, we had the first recession on record we've ever had in which housing starts didn't decline. So that's because Greenspan wouldn't let the economy clear everything out. All the bad investments, stupid production decisions, clear them out. So instead, people drew the conclusion, wow, we've had a recession and yet housing's still robust. So I guess that means housing never goes down, it's the best investment you can make, and all these myths get started because Greenspan, instead of saying to people, we've got to abandon a lot of what we've been doing, he says, oh, no, full steam ahead, keep on doing what you've been doing. So now, the crash we have now is all the worse because in the interim, we've been persisting in these incorrect flows of spending and production. It's all the worse because instead of being corrected, we were affirmed. And so that is what Greenspan has done. And now recently, we had Greenspan, all tears and pity on television, saying to us that, you know, this crisis just goes to show that there is a flaw in the free market that he had never noticed before. Now, of course, it means a lot when a guy like this people falsely believe is a free market guy because of his Ayn Rand days 40 years ago. He's still a free market guy today. And people say, well, you know, hey, if even Greenspan says there's a flaw, who are you? You mere mortals, who are you to dispute what Greenspan says? Well, I would just simply say to Greenspan, not that he's listening, he's off making $150,000 a speech. Pretty good racket he's got going. But I would say to Alan Greenspan, we have found the flaw, and it is you. Now, without the Fed, how could you have a housing bubble? Now, a lot of people have tried to say these bubbles, and by bubble I just mean that prices that are unsustainably high. They can't possibly stay that high. And I realize this is a sensitive subject here in Las Vegas, but there's no getting around it, right? We have to talk about this. There are some people who say this is just a psychological phenomenon. You know, people just become insanely attached to a particular kind of investment or a particular asset class. And I don't mean to discount psychological explanations. I do think that once a bubble gets going, it feeds on itself. But I think the cause and effect and the order is sometimes mixed up, because if it had just been psychology, well, the market would have put a damper on that simply because where would you have gotten the credit to keep investing in housing? Because if there is unusual activity in some sector, prices go up. And if you had a free market in banking, interest rates would go up to say, hey, we're running out of stuff to lend. You don't actually need 3 houses. Maybe you should rethink this. But when you have a Soviet commissar running money and interest rates, you know, the big free marketeer is the Soviet commissar running money and interest rates, then he can create all this new money, pump it in, keep interest rates low, and keep this artificial phony thing going. So this was always Mises' argument, and even Anna Schwartz, who's not an Austrian but a Chicago school economist, said that anytime you have an asset bubble, there's always some kind of artificial credit inflating it. That's what does it. Because there's no way you'd be able to afford the constantly increasing prices unless there was some consistent spigot of credit being pumped into the economy. So it's not fair to blame HGTV for the housing bubble. I mean, that's, you know, it's a crazy simultaneous thing, and it may have played some minor role, but without the Fed pressing the accelerator, we wouldn't have had this problem. We should also point out that the issue of lowering lending standards is not altogether separable from the issue of the Fed. It's not just the Community Reinvestment Act. It's that if the Fed pumps money into the economy, into the banking system, well, under the incentive structure we have right now, the banks want to stay loaned up to the absolute legal extent possible. So if they get suddenly more money to lend out, and it's burning a hole in their pockets, who is going to be the recipients? Who will be the recipients of this money? If not people they would have rejected otherwise. Because, for example, the example I give in Meltdown is, let's suppose I've got a basketball team, and then as soon as I pick my players, I'm suddenly told, by the way, you get to pick 2 more. Well, logically, where am I going to pick those 2 more players from? From the pool of people I had just rejected. So naturally the standards are going to go down. That's unavoidable. And all through this, by the way, we had something that investors knew informally as the Greenspan put, which everyone understood to mean that Greenspan is not going to let things unravel. If things turn bad for major market actors, he'll intervene and bail you out. And this happened time and time again. So this is not some theory that I came up with. You can Google Greenspan put and find out all about this. And I talk about it in Meltdown. But again, I mean, where is the free market in this? I'd like to know. I mean, in what way could this be the free market? What in fact happens when you have a central bank, and particularly since 1971, what happens is it institutionalizes what we call